Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker. Hi, Justin.
Oh, hey, Mark.
Oh, I thought you lost me there for a second. I was like, this is off to a bad start. It's trade deadline. I mean, basically, this is like the pre-trade deadline day because we have several moves already. We're recording this on Wednesday, March 6th. So 2 days, less than 48 hours now from the trade deadline. And there's already been moves. We are going to talk about all of them, but we plan on going through every team in the NHL, all 32 teams, and offering some thoughts on what we think they'll do at deadline time. And that stands true. We'll go through the trades as we hit those teams and just kind of roll from there. So we're not going to spend any more time on an intro. We're just going to dive right in. Let's start with the Pacific Division. Let's go in alphabetical order, and let's party on with the Anaheim Ducks, which is a perfect segue to one of the trades that was made today.
Yes, I love it. Yeah. I mean, Adam Henrique every
year on this show, we talked about Adam Henrique being traded.
It feels like it. That or John Gibson, I felt like the last few years we were always talking about him or waiting for him to move. But yeah, if you got the trade, read it off. Let's go.
Yeah, so in this move, Edmonton Oilers acquire Sam Carrick and Adam Henrique from the Anaheim Ducks. And I mean, as far as what this means for the Edmonton Oilers, you look at it and you go, wow, did the Oilers finally get the depth that they've been needing in their top six? Like, I mean, what they got, it wasn't a huge haul, kind of a little strange. It was a three-team trade. Anaheim Ducks traded Adam Henrique to the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Lightning retained 50%, and in exchange for the rights to goaltender Ty Taylor. Then Tampa Bay traded Henrique to the Oilers, and they retained 50%. So does Anaheim, sorry. And that's in exchange for a fourth-round pick that will become a fourth-round selection in 2025 if Edmonton does not win the Cup this season. And then Edmonton also gets Sam Carrick and the rights to Ty Taylor from Anaheim, along with a seventh-round pick, and in exchange for the Oilers' first-round pick. So we'll just pull it back. The Edmonton Oilers paid a first-round pick for these two players. That's pretty much, yeah, there's some little prospects being moved around, but first-round pick for Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick.
Yeah, and there's that fifth and fourth round in there for salary purposes. But I'll tell you what, yeah, Edmonton Oilers, man, grab some depth. I know the center market was kind of dwindling there with Monahan and Elias Lindholm being traded earlier these past couple of weeks, but which we might see Lindholm get traded again. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But as far as Henrique's concerned, now Edmonton can finally have, in my opinion, a solid number three center to have. They don't have to rely on Ryan McLeod, Dylan Holloway. They can slot in Adam Henrique perfectly in that third line center spot. And then if for some reason, right, they want to load up, he's a guy who can play on the wing. He's very versatile up and down in your top six, and he brings a lot of defensive, aspect. He's easily going to be on their top, penalty kill unit, which has been pretty mundane in my opinion. So he's going to upgrade that tremendously. And then of course, he probably has, I mean, I don't know, I don't have the dates in front of me, but he's got a little familiarity there with Corey Perry as well.
That is true. I get, yeah, they would have been there at the same time. Corey Perry left there in, well, that's a great question. Adam Henrique got to Anaheim in the middle of the 17-18 regular season. I am pretty sure that Corey Perry would have been there for a minute, right? He was there. That might have been the year that he was dealt, was it?
Well, let's take a peek here.
Taking a peek as we go. As far as
18-19,
yeah. So they played together for a year and a half or so. That was kind of the big downturn of Corey Perry. I mean, that year he got hurt. He only had 10 points, and that was kind of that. So I guess they really would have played less than about 80 games together over the course of that time. But yes, you're right. A little bit of familiarity there. And Adam Henrique, I really think for the Oilers, it's going to allow them to put him anywhere. Like they could play him in the top 6, they can play him in their top 9, and have him center that third line. But he can shift all over the place, and I think that that's the beautiful thing about Adam Henrique. He is very much on a good team. He's a Swiss Army knife. On Anaheim, he was not. He kind of had to play a top 6 role, and like they had no hope without him not playing that role. But I think for the most part, he reminds me of that Swiss Army knife type of player. Play him anywhere, center, wing, wherever you want him to go, he'll go. He'll kill penalties. He could play in your power play, and he will fill whatever hole you need him to fill. And for the Oilers, they've been wildly consistent since being the worst team in the NHL through the first 15 or so games. But I think that he can only provide that extra depth in the playoffs when you know someone's going to get hurt, and he'll be there to kind of come up and move around the lineup wherever you need him to be. So I like the move for Edmonton and what it provides from a depth standpoint. Not a big goal scorer, but everything else, he kind of is that like intangibles kind of guy.
Right. Yeah. And he's been to the finals too, right? In 11-12 with New Jersey. So he's got that experience making those deep runs. So that's going to be great for them. Outside of that, I mean, he really has only had 4 games of playoff experience with Anaheim. But yeah, he's going to be great to, again, Swiss Army knife kind of guy. He's going to provide, a great face-off man, penalty kill. He'll chip in on offense very, very well. And I think he'll slide him pretty easily with this group.
Yeah. And I have to think, based on what the Edmonton Oilers salary cap is looking like, they've got a projected cap space of $87,000. That doesn't buy you very much. And I would guess that unless the Oilers are able to move someone else out as well, I would assume that they're going to be done. Unless maybe they could move what do you look at and say, like, is somebody going to take on what, Cody Ceci? Probably not. So I would think that they're done moving guys, and in the offseason they'll buy out Jack Campbell, and that'll be that for that. That'll open up some cap space. But for now, I would think that they're going to be done. And do you really want to disrupt what's been going on there? Because since a new head coach came in, they have been fantastic.
Right. I agree with you. And I think, maybe you might want to look to upgrade on the back end, right? On bringing maybe a 4, 5, 6 number defenseman. But again, you have to move out salary, and to move a guy like Cody Ceci with a year left, or even, Brett Kulak, it's going to cost you. And they don't have, they gave up their first round pick for this year. And I suspect they're probably not going to be willing to part with a 25 or 26 first rounder at this point, considering that they don't have too many draft picks in the top 3 rounds over the next few years.
Yeah. And understanding that, hey, the cap's going to go up. We're going to have a little more flexibility. Better to save those picks and make moves at the deadline those years than maybe stock up right now and go all in. I think this Oilers team they're doing everything they can to give this team some extra boost. But at the same time, there's no reason to go out and spend 3 first-round picks right now. I just don't see the type of player that could come in and really, really go take Edmonton, like a Matthias Ekholm. When they grabbed him last year, that was a game changer. But I don't think there's a Matthias Ekholm out there that they could grab at this stage of the game. Like the Oilers don't have the space or the ability to go grab like a Colton Parayko. And that would be the kind of player that they would need to go on the back end. And I just don't. I think the price is so high for some of these lower tier defensemen, like number 4 defensemen. I mean, we've seen first round picks for a number 4 defenseman, and I that's really expensive in a year where I think you're better off using those picks later on in other trade deadlines where there's maybe a little more cap flexibility. Let's just circle back to the Anaheim Ducks, since they were supposed to be the team that we actually talked about in this. Are there anybody else that you think will move? You think Silverberg is on the move? Him and Vetrano are kind of the 2 that have been talked about the most. Anybody going to bite on Jakob Silverberg?
I don't know so much about Silverberg. That one might be a little tough. He's got a 5.25 cap hit. It's going to be tougher to squeeze in. And again, it's probably going to most teams that are going to look for a guy like that to play a defensive role on your third line to chip in a little offense. Maybe aren't willing to part with what it's going to take to broker a third team in there to take some salary. So, but I could see a team making a play on Frank Vetrano. He's still got a year left at 3.65, and again, what he brings to the table, I think he's more than bringing you value at that kind of cost. So I think teams are still gonna look at him. I think you could see a team like Vegas, a team like Vancouver, who we've heard going after Jake Gensel. He could definitely be an option for some of those teams that still need help on the wing or are looking to fill in at that right wing spot. They might be willing to part with, maybe not a first round pick anymore, but you might see a second and maybe some prospects go out for a guy like Frank Vetrano.
Yeah, and when I look at Silverberg, I think, well, why are you going to go get him when there's plenty of other options to go out? I wonder, Silverberg at the end of this year, if he goes and plays somewhere else. I mean, he's like a 1 year, $1 million kind of guy at this stage, right? Like, he's not getting any kind of long-term deal. He's struggled. Seems like he is less and less productive as the years go by. 16 points in 60 games. He's got 6 goals. That's not somebody I'm spending resources to bring in.
No, I wouldn't even consider giving up a 6th-round pick for him.
Right. Yeah, he's not moving the needle anywhere. You can get a guy for $800K doing what he does.
Yep.
So okay, let's one more. John Gibson, do you think the trade deadline is gonna result in him getting moved, or are we waiting for the summer?
No, I think it's a summer deal. There's just too many other goaltenders on the market right now that I think teams would rather spend the assets on it with terms still left on it. It's just going to be tricky to try to squeeze in right now.
Yep, I agree. Calgary Flames, obviously have already made a bulk of moves, trading out Lindholm, trading out Chris Tanev, and Noah Hannafin. I think he is absolutely going to get moved at this point, and that's really the big fish. I am surprised that there has not been more talked about Oliver Shillington, because to me he'd be a nice get as well. You could get him for even if you wanted to get 2 teams to hold his stuff, you get him down to a $600,000 cap hit. But Noah Hannafin, obviously the prize. Give me your top 3 places that you think Noah Hannafin will end up.
Yeah, I have to put Tampa Bay on there. Obviously, there's I'm a firm believer of where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yep.
Yeah, and right now Tampa's been looking hard. They want to get him signed and extended and then trade for him. But outside of Tampa, I think that you can look at the Detroit Red Wings. I think they're in another team that's in the market for a top 4 left side defenseman. And then probably maybe a wild card third team that I'm going to throw in there, just because it always seems like they're always trying to get a top tier defenseman in here, is probably the Boston Bruins. Not sure if they'll be able to get that done or make it happen, but it wouldn't shock me to see them make a play for a guy like Hannafin at this point.
Okay. Yeah. To me, the Bruins just they've got a lot committed to that back end, and their need for us a center, a number 1 center, a number 2 center, I don't care, just somebody who can play the center position is so high. And I think you're still looking at this group going, we could win the cup. Like, we absolutely could get out of the East, and then anything goes. Like, all right, let's say we play the Vegas Golden Knights or the Edmonton Oilers in the finals. Do we think we're capable of beating them? I think that Boston stands a chance of beating any of the teams that come out of the West, like as much of a chance as anybody else has. I think that the Bruins are in a position to where they could win. They could also lose in the first round, but I think it is imperative that they go out and at least try to bring somebody in who can play that center position and give them a little bit of depth there and see what can happen. And we'll get to the Bruins more, but I don't think that the Bruins and Hannafin are necessarily a fit because of the dollar amount that they're going to need to pay for a center. Like, they got to get a good center, and they're going to have to pay him money, and they have a lot already devoted to their defense with McAvoy, Carlo. You've got Hampus Lindholm at 6.5. Like, they kind of already have their top 4 decently set. I know Grzelcyk is a free agent at the end of the year. I can see him re-signing there and getting a decent deal as well. But I'm thinking, I don't know if anybody else is on the table other than Tampa Bay. Like that's where he's going.
Well, I mean, he is going to, I don't want to say necessarily pick where he goes because he, of
He only has
course,
like an 8-team no trade, right? Like it's not.
yeah, but I think right now he's kind of, his agent and him have set the table where like, hey, where we go, we want to potentially sign an 8-year extension. So most teams looking at him as a rental, knowing that they can't sign him, right? They're probably scared off a little bit at this point, and I think they'll wait till the last minute to make a move. Because I do think, whether or not they can get a deal done with a team like Tampa to get him signed long term, if that doesn't happen, I still think he's going to get moved. And whether or not it's to a team where he wants to sign long term will probably not happen. And that's why I kind of throw Boston in there, because if they can't go out, they've been linked to Elias Lindholm. And I think if they can't get a guy like him in there to center, their top line, they're going to try to beat teams defensively, right? Where you beat them down 3-1, 2-1, and bringing in a guy like, Noah Hannafin will definitely help with that a lot on the back end.
Maybe with the idea that, he's not going to sign here in the offseason, but we'll spend a first-round pick to have him as a rental.
Exactly.
Like Noah Hannafin for a first-round pick for a rental, totally fair, especially given the other players that have gone for first-round picks. I mean, i.e. Adam Henrique. Like, is Adam Henrique really first-round pick value? I don't think so. But teams are just desperate to haul in bodies right now.
There's no other centers, so that's why they're paying.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's the supply and demand. And I look at Hannafin. I think that, Calgary's going to go, well, we can basically get the equivalent of 2 or 3 assets as opposed to 1 for Hannafin, or like 1 asset and like kind of a C-level thing from someone else if it's just a rental. So I would think that that's what they're holding out for. It has been quite the saga. I don't know if you heard about what happened with Jacob Markstrom.
Oh, and the deal to New Jersey?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
For our listeners who maybe did not hear, I know there's been a lot of fire, a lot of smoke about Jacob Markstrom. It is true that there was a deal in place, and Jacob Markstrom told Craig Conroy, the general manager of the Calgary Flames, he said, "Do not come to me unless there's a deal on the table, it's been accepted, and it's like when I come and I give my approval, it's done." So Craig Conroy came to him and said, "We have a deal. Like we're accepting this. It's good. You're good to go." And Jacob Markstrom said, "Okay, cool. I'll go to New Jersey." He was he might as well have started packing his bags. He was like, "Okay, I'm getting traded." And then Craig Conroy, they were going to hold some of the salary, and apparently the owner of the Calgary Flames did not want to retain any salary. And so Craig Conroy had to go back and say, "Actually, we can't do the deal if we retain salary." And the deal fell apart. And they said, "Oops, sorry. You'll be starting tonight, Jacob, for the Calgary Flames."
Whoops. I mean, to tip my cap at his way, I mean, he's been super professional about it, and you haven't heard him, blast off on the media, but man, I know New Jersey's still pursuing too. I keep hearing reports from, Frank Cervelli and everybody else that New Jersey's still trying to get this guy, right? And clearly they're making a push for the playoffs after firing Lindy Ruff. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but yeah, they're not giving up on their playoff chances right now.
The last time the New Jersey Devils fired somebody this late in the season, do you remember who it was?
No,
I
don't think so.
believe that it was either in 2000 or it was in 2003 when they won the Stanley Cup, and they fired Kevin Constantine right around the trade deadline. You can fact check me on this.
Wow.
They fired Kevin Constantine at the trade deadline, and Larry Robinson took over as their coach, and they turned a corner. And I think they were actually in first place when they fired him.
No kidding.
I want to say I'll fact check myself when we talk about the next team, but that's I think the last time that the Devils fired somebody this late in the game, like we're 2 days from trade deadline, 3 days, and Lindy Ruff gets fired in favor of none other than Travis Green, who I thought that was just a weird hiring anyways, coming off a pretty prickly stay in Vancouver. So we'll see if Travis Green can get things turned around.
Well, hey, I'll tell you what, though. Travis Green has a relationship with Jacob Markstrom, so food for thought.
That is very true. That's a great point. I did not think about that. All right, let's swing. Do we anything else we want to hit on the Edmonton Oilers? We kind of focused on them for that trade for Adam Henrique, but anything that you want to hit on for the Oilers before we move to the LA Kings?
No, they're done. That's it.
Okay, perfect. On to the LA Kings. They're an interesting team right now because they've really fallen pretty far from graces, and they're in a similar position, I would say, to I guess they are sitting in and around the playoffs, but they're in a very similar position to what I would say the New Jersey Devils, like a team that had really high expectations. Things were going really well. I know they're still 6 points in the playoffs right now, so they're pretty secure. But people had really high expectations for this team, and they really have not been met, especially as of late. I mean, they're 6-3-1 now, especially with the coaching change, but they've had a lot of inconsistencies throughout this year. Is this a year where they're going to go and buy, or is this a year where they, maybe sell off a couple pieces?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be sellers, but because they really don't have, outside of maybe Matt Roy, they really don't have any big pieces to sell off. But I do think, there's been rumors that they've been interested in Tyler Toffoli, and I know New Jersey wants to hang on to him. They want to try to extend him and obviously make a push. But I do think, they're going to look at a piece like him, somebody they're familiar with, right? That he's been there before. So they're going to look to try to pull a trigger on a big name like that. I think they wouldn't mind getting a top six winger in there. But outside of that, really, I think this team's probably going to just end up standing pat, even though they do have, a couple $1 million in deadline cap space. So the only thing I could really see them doing outside of bringing in a guy like Tyler Toffoli is maybe broker a deal, maybe retain a little salary cap for another team and bring in like a 3rd or 4th round pick. But other than that, I think they're probably just going to hang tight and go with what they got.
Okay. Yeah, I would think that that's the case. I could see them going after a goaltender. That would really be the only thing. And is that goalie going to be somebody who's going to be like a number one? I don't think so. I think it's really, really hard to bring in a number one goalie at this stage of the game. Like, how many number one goalies have been dealt at the trade deadline and made a difference, won a playoff round? When's the last time that's happened? It just doesn't happen very often because it's so hard to do. I know there's if you remember Ryan Miller being dealt from the Sabres to the Blues, and he was just freaking terrible with the Blues. It was like when, everybody, like Martin Brodeur went to the Blues too, and he was terrible there as well.
Yep.
But that was very late in his career. But yeah, anyways, that's that's what I was thinking. By the way, I'm mad at myself because now I can't remember what coach it was. It was not Kevin Constantine. I was wrong. I know it's hard for me to admit. I was wrong. Kevin Constantine, though, did have at the time, he was the coach of the San Jose Sharks when they had their 58-point improvement between 2 seasons, which is just madness. Imagine winning 30 more games than the year before, basically. But anyways, I'm going to find what I was talking about where New Jersey fired somebody. So we'll figure that out. But anyways, okay. LA, well, let's go San Jose, who is obviously a bunch of sellers. They've got Kevin LeBanc, Mike Hoffman, Anthony Duclair, Alexander Barabanov, just to name a few. UFAs. I mean, Capo Kakinen, their goaltender, is also a UFA. Any chance that, all these guys, some of these guys are moved, and who do you think it's going to be? I mean, I think Barabanov is probably the most sought after player here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, obviously teams, maybe not necessarily looking at what he's done this year, but, what he's done last year and the years before that. And he brings a little sandpaper to the game, and he brings that grit that I think a lot of teams love in that playoff push when you have to grind it out a little bit more. But to my surprise, actually, though, I do think they'll end up moving a couple pieces here, but I have barely heard anything about Anthony Duclair, and I think he's a piece that I'm surprised a lot of teams haven't really pursued a little bit more. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets dealt, because we're talking about a guy who a couple seasons ago was a 31 goal scorer. So why wouldn't you want a guy like that in your corner? And again, last year in the playoffs, just 11 points in 20 games. So he's going to chip in a little bit, and he's got that deep run experience. So why wouldn't you want a guy like that on your team?
Exactly. By the way, I was not Kevin Constantine, although Kevin Constantine did coach the New Jersey Devils. I figured out when this happened, and Kevin Constantine coached the Devils after a couple years after this, but they fired Robbie Ftorek on March 23rd, and then they won the Stanley Cup with Larry Robinson as their interim head coach.
Wow.
March 23rd.
An interim tag too, nonetheless.
Yep. So they went to the Stanley Cup Finals after firing. So then that would have been I'm pretty sure that would have been after the trade deadline, March 23rd. So, anyways, I just wanted to correct myself there. Pretty impressive to be able to do that. And then it's funny because then Robinson was fired the following year. 2 years later, 01-02, he was fired.
Wild.
And then he came back as the assistant coach the next year. I know, and that's when Pat Burns was the head coach of the Devils. Anyway, enough of the history lesson. San Jose. I mean, San Jose has to keep some people, but I think that San Jose will make some moves here. All right, let's go Seattle Kraken. Seattle's an interesting one because of Jordan Eberle. Maybe the best winger available now that Tarasenko has been dealt. Outside of Jake Gensel, is there a better winger available than Jordan Eberle?
Oh, boy. I know some teams are going to look at Riley Smith. I've even heard Brian Rust's name thrown around a little bit in connection with the Red Wings. But, yeah, for me, I love Jordan Eberle's two-way ability. He's very responsible and still – I mean, he can still skate. He can still put the puck in the net. So why wouldn't you want a guy like that? He brings that leadership quality. And to me, I know with him in Seattle, there's been talks. They want to get him extended, right? But they're not there yet. So, who knows in the next couple days if, they don't get close. It wouldn't shock me if Seattle, jettisons him and sends him packing somewhere else because, look, let's face it. They're, they're sitting 5 or not 5, but 5 points out of a playoff spot right now and a game behind or a game in hand on Nashville. But you know what, in my opinion, I think, you've got to hop St. Louis. You've got to push Nashville or Vegas out of there or even Los Angeles.
And I don't think anybody's pushing Nashville. Nashville is just on absolute fire.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think Seattle's got enough in the tank right now to do it.
Yeah. And Seattle did trade Alexander Venberg about 2 hours ago. They traded him for a second-round pick in 2024, a fourth-rounder in 2025, and will pay for half of Venberg's remaining salary. Traded him to the New York Rangers.
Yeah, so I love this move for New York. It's simple. I mean, they needed a third-line center with Philip Hedl done for the year, so they get it in Alex Wenberg, who is a good face-off guy. He's very responsible defensively, so he'll fit in nice. He'll slide in, real nice, and gives them a little bit of flexibility. Again, if they want to, shuffle guys around a little bit, they can do that. But I do have to say, I do not think the Rangers are done. They could target a guy like we talked about, Fake for Toronto, but we'll talk about them a little later.
Yep. And as far as Venberg, I think if you're the Rangers, you're obviously not hoping that you're not thinking he's going to get back to his 30 goal scoring kind of goal scoring ability. But in Seattle, I think he was asked to do some different things, and Columbus was bad. It just wasn't a right fit. I wonder if Venberg could get back to a place where he's scoring a little more consistently, and that would be a huge boost for the Rangers. We'll see what he looks like in the playoffs, because I think other than last year, and he had a decent playoff last year that he hadn't had too many opportunities. So always fun to see that. Anyone else that do you think Tatar is going anywhere?
No, I think he's staying. I think they like him there, and it wouldn't shock me if they try to get a deal done with him too, but probably not till the offseason.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Vancouver Canucks, they've done some of their damage. We thought that maybe they would be closer to done than not. And then we start hearing Elias Lindholm's name tossed around quite a bit in I know it's been out there for Jake Gensel and or flipping maybe a three-way trade there somehow, but not super happy with how Lindholm is fitting in, and they just want to cut bait is what it sounds like. So I mean, he could move, but then, I think Vancouver really they could use maybe another defenseman bringing in. Like, it seems like Vancouver's kind of gearing up for a long run.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the problem with a guy like Lindholm right now is the fact that they've got JT Miller, they've got Elias Pettersson, right? Guys that were slotted number 1 and number 2 down the middle. And so you've got Elias Lindholm essentially playing third line center right now with Connor Garland. And to me, that's not what you want, right? You want to bring in another winger so you can keep a guy like, JT Miller and Pettersson on the center, and you can effectively use Lindholm, like you should be, right? He should be playing top 6 minutes.
Lindholm should just be playing on the wing. I don't understand.
Well, he's not very effective on the wing, and it's been reported that he's not comfortable there.
Yeah.
And same with Elias Pettersson, he's just not comfortable on the wing. So if you've got a couple guys there that they don't really slot in well on the side there, that you have to play them down the middle, you're kind of wasting him. Having to play him on the third line. With guys like
somebody
Connor
should
Garland.
have thought about this before they traded for him, eh?
Right. I think they expected him to slot in on that wing pretty well, even though, again, I'll go back to, his time in Calgary. I know he primarily was a center, but he did also play a little bit on the wing at times there too with Sean Monahan. But, again,
certainly his most effective was when he was between Gaudreau and Tkachuk.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why you're hearing Boston being thrown around there, right? They need a number 1 center. And that's why I think, a guy like Jake Gensel will just fit in perfect with this team. He's got speed, he knows how to finish, and he's got a cup. So he can, help those guys, those younger players there in Vancouver that don't know really what it takes to go deep, and he'll, help lead the way there.
All right. Let's head to the last team in the Pacific, the Vegas Golden Knights. We do know already that they have traded for Anthony Mantha from the Washington Capitals, a third-round pick, second-round pick? I can't remember now. But Anthony Mantha to the Vegas Golden Knights. How do you think Mantha's going to fit in? Because he has had a resurgence type of season. He's kind of become that like 20-ish goal scorer again this year, where he can be relied upon to provide some depth scoring. Where do you see him fitting here with the Knights? Because the Knights are just a different animal than anywhere he's played before. Detroit, Detroit was bad almost the whole time that he was in Detroit. And then he goes to Washington, and Washington very much was already on the downswing. And now he's going to a team that is expected to win the Stanley Cup. How do you think he's going to respond? I mean, you watched him for years. What do you think that his game, what can he bring to the Golden Knights that they don't already have?
So
Ellie Smith's spot.
Well, so here's the thing. I think they're going to start him off on the third line and try to create some depth scoring, right? He brings a lot of size, right? Brings a lot of size. He knows how to go to the net. He's got good hands. So you're going to see him probably slot in on that third line to start with maybe a guy like Nicholas Roy or even William Karlsson centering him. But, regardless, he has the ability to move up and down in the lineup, right? I think similar to Barbashev, he still has a little grit in his game. He's got that sandpaper because of his size. He can go in the dirty areas, which I think Vegas really, really liked about him. But the thing with him, and especially in Detroit, is, he's so up and down as far as being engaged. And when he's not engaged, he just doesn't have the hustle. He's just not out there. He's just kind of skating in circles, just not creating plays and not really being effective, right? And so for me, Vegas is a perfect team because they've got leaders in there like Jack Eichel, Stone, Karlsson, Stevenson, guys that are not going to let him just skate around in circles and, just kind of lollygag out there. They're going to keep him motivated. And now that he knows, I think, he's got an opportunity for a cup. And again, he's playing essentially for a new contract as well. Probably not with Vegas, but with another team. So he's going to be motivated. And I think this is going to be a really, really good fit for Vegas. I don't think he's going to, light the lamp up all the time, but I think he's going to provide some really, really good depth scoring. And then, of course, if they need to, move him up and down the lineup as injuries happen.
Well, injuries have happened. They still without Jack Eichel and Mark Stone probably not coming back to the playoffs. So, which is why Vegas can just go out and acquire anybody that they want. Uh, and are we possibly? Is it possible now? The Vegas Golden Knights have lost 3 in a row. They're 2-7-1 in their last 10. You've got Nashville, who's about to jump them. They're tied in points. Nashville is on fire. The Seattle Kraken 7-2-1 in their last 10, 6 points behind the Vegas Golden Knights. Are we about to see a replay of 21-22 when the Vegas Golden Knights could not stay healthy and they just couldn't win down the stretch and they ended up missing the playoffs?
No, I don't think so. They've got
Nope.
Jack Eichel back.
He is back. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you've got Bruce Cassidy behind the bench there. I just think they're far too talented to to falter for too long. I think they'll figure this out pretty quick. And here in the next couple of days too, I don't think they're done. I think they're going to make another move. They've got right now about $4.4 million in deadline space. So, and they've got all their first round draft picks for the next few years. So, to me, this is a team that's got a first round pick to burn. And if they go after a guy like, for example, Pavel Bludenich or even Frank Vetrano, I absolutely could see a move like that coming here soon.
Okay. Let's go to the Arizona Coyotes, first team in the Central Division. They have one defenseman signed through the end of this year. Do you know who it is?
Well, luckily I'm taking a look at things online, but it's Shea Weber.
It is Shea Weber. Shea Weber, who hasn't played in 2 years and will never play again. Yes. So they have no defenseman signed after this year. 4 RFAs eligible for arbitration, but yes, they've got Matt Dumba, Josh Brown, Troy Stetcher, Travis Dermott, all UFAs at the end of the year, and then from a forward perspective, Jason Zucker, who unfortunately has really not been able to put himself into position where teams really want him.
Yeah, and I think the problem is too right now, from what I'm hearing, that they want at least a second round pick plus for Jason Zucker to retain salary too, which is going to have to happen if they're going to move out his large $5.3 million cap hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what? I think ultimately they'll cave and they'll move him. Will they get a second round or first round pick for him? Probably not, in my opinion.
Not a first.
Definitely no. It wouldn't surprise me if you get like a conditional third, and maybe like a 6th round pick or something like that for a guy like Jason Zucker. But I do think they'll get him moved. And the piece that I'm more curious about more than anything, and you talked about the defense, to me is Matt Dumba. I know he signed that 1-year contract, and he's not exactly, put up the statistics that I think we were all expecting him to. But he's still a very capable defensive defenseman, right-handed shot, which I know teams always covet. And to me, he could be an easy guy to bring in that could play on your bottom pair, especially if you get them to keep half a salary at that $1.95 million. I think you could make him work.
Yeah. Is there a team out there that for a first round pick for Matt Dumba and Jason Zucker, the package that's together? I don't think
it's worth it for a first rounder. And then I don't think there's teams that have that kind of space to bring in that kind of money. You'd have to broker in a third team, but I could see a team easily moving a second round pick to bring in a guy like Matt Dumba at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the Chicago Blackhawks, another team who is serious sellers. Anthony Beauvillier, Tyler Johnson, both UFAs, along with Colin Blackwell. Blackwell will be the easiest player to move out at a $1.2 million. They probably don't even need to eat his salary, which right now, yeah, they only have one retained salary, that's Jake McCabe, so they've got two left. What are we thinking with the Blackhawks? Tyler Johnson going to get moved, or is he staying?
I think. Oh boy! So he's got a modified no trade clause, basically, where he can submit a 20-team trade list right now at this point. So, again, 20 teams. So there's only 10 teams, and you got to figure most of the contenders, right, are going to be on that 20-team trade list. Right. So for me, I think it's probably going to come down to a desperate team, right? So a team that essentially misses out on all the pieces that they were hoping to get, and then okay, shoot, we'll throw out a 4th round pick for a guy like Tyler Johnson, and you keep half a salary maybe. But it'll be a last minute ditch effort. I think it's going to be tough. I'm 50-50 on it, and same with Anthony Beauvillier. I don't know if a guy like Bavilla gets moved with his cap hit. But again, I think most of their UFAs are going to be coin flips at this point.
Okay. And they've been sellers all year long. The Colorado Avalanche, they make a big splash for their number 2 center. They traded Bowen Byram, their 4th overall pick a few years ago, defenseman, for Casey Middlestat, the Buffalo Sabres. As well, they acquire Sean Walker and a 5th round pick for a conditional 2025 first round pick and Ryan Johansson. And you said that you thought Ryan Johansson would get waived by the Flyers. Is that correct?
Yes, he's already been waived.
He has been waived. Okay.
Yes.
So they're obviously either hoping that somebody would just take him, or more than likely just you bury him in the minors and then he's out of here. Yeah. So 2 huge moves already by the Avalanche. I guess I can't really see them making any other big splashes, but that kind of solves some of their problems where, they get their number 2 center and they effectively replace Bowen Byram with somebody who is actually probably a little more experienced, better defensively in Sean Walker.
Yeah, I love this move. Sean Walker is a guy who's going to move the puck, so he's probably going to pair on that second pair with Girard there. We know that Bowen Byram, he's had his injury history, right? So I think this was a smart move by Colorado, right? It's a low risk. You bring in a guy like Casey Middlestat, who's looked very, very good in Buffalo this year. I think he's gonna do well as that second line center, hopefully for Colorado, and hopefully that solves the problem, especially considering he's going to be an RFA after this season. So kind of curious to see what kind of contract they can get him signed to. But back to Sean Walker, he's a guy that likes to move the puck. Gerard's going to be that safety net back there, a guy who plays very well defensively and responsible. This is going to, I think, work out well for Colorado because they still got a stacked defense. You're going to get Makar and Devin Taves like 25, 27 minutes a night. But
and in the playoffs, they're playing half the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Sean Walker and Girard on that second pair is going to be phenomenal. I think any team would love to have that as your second pairing, defense. And so, Sean Walker can still chip in offensively, and hopefully Casey Middlestat, again, provides that stability there in the middle of that second line center unit. And then you're going to get, Nichushkin back here, hopefully against Minnesota over at the end of the week here. So this could look like a scary Avalanche team here pretty quickly.
Yeah. And Colorado needs to do everything they can do to get home ice advantage. That team has lost 6 times at home out of 30 games this year, 24-6.
Well, McKinnon, he puts up like 80 points every single game at home. I think he's riding like a 31 game home point streak. So he's killing it. 14-5 on the road and 24-6 at home. That is a tremendous disparity between the two. I mean, I don't know that we've seen, if we end the year and they continue on that clip, I don't know that we've seen a team with such a difference between their home and away play. That's pretty crazy. They also have they have the worst away record, I think, out of any team in the playoffs right now. Tampa Bay is the only team with a worse road record, and they're 14-16-2. Tampa's 19-8-4 at home, but Tampa Bay is barely clinging on to a playoff spot. You've got Colorado, who's firmly in the playoffs. I mean, they're 14 points up on being out of the playoffs. They're making the playoffs. So for a team that is third place in this division, if they could just figure it out away from home, they would be first in this division, hands down, no problem. Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you can't get McKinnon out there with the matchups that you want being away, right? You get last change. Teams can throw the top defensive unit out there against, Nathan McKinnon, and that's effectively what's happening when you don't have a second line center, right. Who can match up against these other teams, other units and produce. So, hopefully, again, Casey Middlestat kind of solves that. Getting Nichushkin back will help with that too. So maybe, maybe being on the road won't be such a big deal, but I'll tell you what, for a Winnipeg team that is very stingy at home, I would not want to have to face them in the first round.
Yep. Speaking of another team that they could play in the first round, the Dallas Stars, who already went and grabbed Chris Tanev to add to their defensive core. The Dallas Stars, I think, maybe still looking to add to this team, maybe even still looking to add to their defense. The Dallas Stars, for my money, outside of, I think I've got Colorado, Vegas, Edmonton, and Dallas. Those are my like top 4 teams in the West that I'm most scared of going into the finals. I just think they have very few weaknesses on their team. Do you think they'll make any more moves outside of Tanev?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting, right? I think, again, Tanev gives them a lot of flexibility on defense, and you finally can slot in Ryan Suter where he belongs on that third pair. So you get Tanev on that second pair with Esa Lindell. To me, I think that defense is fine. Goaltending, you're not touching it. Maybe you go and try to find a number 7 defenseman. I'm not sure how much you trust Niels Lundqvist, and if you have to bring him back into the playoffs, because last year didn't look too good to me. But again, I would be super scared of this team, regardless what they're doing, making moves or not. To me, their deadline move outside of Tanev at the forward group was bringing up a guy like Logan Stankoven, who has just looked nasty.
Yep, and there, I mean, dude, there's a chance, and if Stankoven had been up here all year long, I know it's you can't do this, but up here all year long, he probably would have won the Calder Trophy.
Probably.
The way he's been playing. I know it's only 6 games, but 8 points in 6 games, and it's not like all these goals and points are coming by easy. He's been a force when he's out there for the Stars. So yes, I agree. Great acquisition there right at the deadline within your own system. Gotta love when that happens. Okay, well, let's move on from Dallas and we'll head over to Minnesota. Minnesota right now sitting, 9 points out of the playoffs. Bill Guerin seems to have this like public display of affection for his team, always saying, we're not giving up. We're not giving up. And you're like, dude, just give up. Like, you've given up. There's no way you're making the playoffs. It's just not happening this year. And you screwed the pooch when you bought everybody out, and you knew that. And it's like you're trying to forget about the, like, put your head in the sand, and we didn't do that. No, we didn't do that. We're still going for it. We're going for the cup. And you're just not, especially in a year where Kirill Kaprizov, who was really your savior these other years, he just has he's still been good, but he hasn't been freakishly dominating like he has been in his first 3 years in the league. I mean, he's still 66 points in 55 games. No knocking him, but just hasn't had the same ability out there to like absolutely take over what's happening on the ice. Just haven't seen it the same way this year from Kaprizov.
No, I agree with you. And, again, he's missed. I mean, guys like Matt Zuccarello have been out at times. And I will say the one nice thing that, if Minnesota has one thing to tip their cap on for the season, it's the emergence of Brock Faber. He's looked phenomenal.
Yep.
And maybe might sneak in there and steal that Calder Trophy away from Connor Bedard. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. That's very possible. But I don't think they're making the playoffs. And I also don't know, they're not trading Marc-Andre Fleury. I don't think that's happening at all. They don't really have a whole lot that they could deal. I mean, you've got Alex Goligoski, who's a UFA at the end of the year. Not really sure at this stage of his career what he fetches you. It's probably so minimal that you're looking at it going, we're not going to trade him. Like, maybe we just keep him anyways, keep him next year, sign him to another 1-year deal. He's only played in 30 games this year. So at this point, trading that, like you're saying, a 7th defenseman, maybe somebody goes, hey, we'll flip you a 6th round pick to bring him in and you eat half his salary. But even that just doesn't seem like he'd be the kind of guy who anybody would be pining over.
No, I think if any moves are done, they've got 3.25 in cap space. So maybe they retain some salary to help broker a deal, but that's pretty much about it, if anything.
Yeah, scoop up the extra pick. Okay. Let's go to the hottest team in the NHL right now, the Nashville Predators. Basically, this has been the Roman Josi, I'm going to put you on my back and get like 3 points every night and be unbelievable. Maybe, we all thought Ryan O'Reilly was crazy when he went here and was talking about winning. And suddenly the last few weeks, he doesn't seem so crazy. They are in pretty decently securely in a playoff spot. 6 points in with less than 20 games left to go. It's a pretty good odds that you're going to make the playoffs. So and they're pretty close to jumping Vegas here. An extra win here or there. You think that the Predators? I know that they sort of their deadline acquisition was signing. Oh my gosh, my brain.
Tommy
Novak, who a lot of teams were looking at. A lot of teams wanted to bring in Tommy Novak as like a third line center. I know that the New York Rangers were in on him, and the Preds go, wait a minute, we need to sign these people because things are going well. And this really might be the most interesting team because they're built so different than almost any other playoff team that we see here. Like they've got this unique mix of veterans and young guys, and one of the best defensemen in the league with kind of a bunch of like guys that maybe you wouldn't want anymore on your defense, and they've really figured it out. And then on top of that, they have one of the best goalies in the world in UC Saros, and they're really just built in a way that you scratch your head wondering how they're this good, and you watch them, and I don't know why this team is good right now, other than they're just putting everything on UC Saros and Roman Yossi, and they're riding. They're going.
Yeah, you said it right. It's Yossi and Saros right now. And so, I know there were a lot of rumors with Juice being moved, but they said they're going to keep him as long as they're in the playoff picture, and it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. And so, I know they've got Askarov in the minors, and he's been phenomenal. But you know what? I've read reports, right, or seen polls where basically people come out and say that, if I had to face anybody in the playoffs, it'd be Nashville or Detroit. I'll tell you what, though. I mean, looking at all the teams in the playoffs right now, UC Saros is probably in the top 2-3 as far as scariest goaltenders you might face in the West, and you could easily get knocked out in the first round by a hot goaltender. So, they're not going to go deep because of him, but they could upset somebody.
Yep. I would say you've got Demko above him, you've got Hellebuck above him, and that might be it at this stage.
Oh, for me, it's just Ottinger and Hellebuck. Anybody else? Yeah.
Ottinger, I really like Ottinger. I mean, obviously he's a great goalie. He has not had a great year. I mean, as far as his typical stats go, I mean, he's having a big down year, 8.99 save percentage, 2.97 goals against. He hasn't been great this year. However, do I doubt that he could step into the playoffs and be much better? No. But I think going into the playoffs, I'm still taking Saros over Ottinger right now.
That's fair.
And Ottinger, I think, is maybe the Stars will tighten up a little bit, but you have to remember he did come from a much more defensive system when he was really gaining steam, and so his stats looked disgusting because he had a different head coach who was playing a far more defensive structured game, and they have opened things up quite a bit. That could be some of the reason that his stats have not been as favorable. Although still, I mean, obviously he's winning games, so that's really all you can ask for. You need a guy to win games, so he's done just that. Let's go. What team is next after the Preds? Let's go St. Louis Blues. Is there a team that is more like up and down? Are they buyers? Are they sellers? Because I keep hearing both.
Yeah, it's puzzling, right? And what's even more puzzling is they're pushing for a playoff spot, but they're willing to deal basically their best offensive player right now in Pavel Buchnevich. Well, let me just not best, but maybe like outside of Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, right? He's their best offensive player, and so that is kind of puzzling, right? I mean, maybe they're also prepping for the future, and maybe they're realistic, right? Like we're not going to go deep even if we get in, so let's try to maximize our return. But to me, I think, what, even if they do get in, sure, they might win a game or two, but they're not winning a series. No. So get rid of Buchnevich, bring in, get a first round pick if you can, and maybe some other assets, and see what you can do.
See, with Buchnevich, at least he's an RFA at the end of the year. If you do trade him, I think the price is going to be very high. It's going to be far more than a first round pick.
Well, he's got another year left on his deal at 5.8.
Just another year. Yeah, he's not even RFA. Yeah. He's got another year. I think it'll be the price tag for Buchnevich will be very high.
Yeah, it'll be a first and at least a very good prospect, and
Maybe like
probably
the
a little bit
second or
more.
third best prospect in an organization, just not the
Yeah.
first, not the first. Yeah, depending on what team. Yeah, I still think Bujanevich. I think he'll ultimately get dealt in the offseason. The Blues tank; they miss the playoffs. But if they make the playoffs, they're going to go, well, see, that's why we kept him. I think their only hope of making the playoffs is if Vegas just like totally falls off.
Probably
at this stage. It's pretty unlikely, but yeah, the Blues. I mean, they could also, Marco Scandella. He's not that far removed from being a pretty solid like bottom pairing defenseman, especially come playoff time. The things that like he plays a playoff brand of hockey. I know, even half a salary, 1.6 million. That's a lot for like a 6th, 7th defenseman. But if you get a couple really low picks and you're able to bring them in and provide some cap relief for St. Louis, to who knows, maybe they look to make a move if they are buying, and Scandella would be a decent person to move out to a team that is looking to make a long run, because he could be somebody who, you get one injury on your blue line and Scandella can scoot up your lineup a little bit and for a short time play a bigger role. I don't think you want him playing in your top 4, but for a short time I think he still could.
Yeah, I think if there's anybody in St. Louis that I'm calling about right outside of Buchnevich, it's probably Oscar Sundquist. He's a good depth piece you could put on a 4th line, and he's still capable of producing. So to me, I think he's probably a guy that I would probably spend a 5th rounder on for sure, to add a little bit of depth, because you're always going to have those injuries to those bottom line guys.
Okay, the Winnipeg Jets. They've come out of nowhere. They did the unthinkable and were able to re-sign Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele, and here they are sitting in second place in the Central Division. They really are, points percentage wise, the top team in the Central, and Connor Hellebuck having a Vezina Trophy potential year, and I look at this team and I go, like, what moves can they realistically make at this point with what they've got available? They have plenty of cap space, but I think they have no first round pick next year. What do you think this Jets team does?
To me, I'm standing pat. Honestly,
Yeah.
They've been phenomenal all year long, and a lot of times, right, the best move is not making a move, because one, I hate to say it, but they do have guys like Mark Scheifele that are getting up there in age, right? When you're getting on the other side of 30, you have to start thinking about the future, right? So for me, holding on to those first round picks, you don't have one in this year's draft, so hang on to those futures as much as you can. And really, they've been playing very, very well, that I'm comfortable just going in with what you have. Sean Monahan has been phenomenal there in that second line center role. He may score 40 goals and only get 2 assists by the time he's done in Winnipeg.
Well, and that's another point, is that yes, he has been a great acquisition, and they just brought him in early.
Yes.
Right. So they did make a move. It's not as if this was the team that they walked into at the beginning of the regular season. So they have made moves. They just made them earlier.
Right. Yeah. So for me, the chemistry's there. You're playing well. Just don't mess with it. And just roll.
All right, let's cruise over to the Eastern Conference, where the Carolina Hurricanes, once again are sitting in the middle of that Metropolitan Division pretty securely. And this time, Andrei Svechnikov is healthy. Do they go after one more goal scorer?
They need to. They absolutely need to. I mean, we saw what happened when Svechnikov was injured last year, and they didn't have him in the playoffs, right? Matt Pacioretty, again, they brought him in to be that guy last year. Didn't work out. Michael Bunting, I think they were kind of hoping he would be a little bit more of a goal scorer this year. He's been all right, but he hasn't been dominant. I mean, he's only got 13 goals and 36 points. But to me, I think they need.
He was really good because he played with Austin Matthews Marner.
Who would have thunk it?
It's like the people were like, "Oh, see, he's just like Zach Hyman," and Zach Hyman was he was good in and of itself, but Michael Bunting was just there to kind of. He was just a guy. That's what it seems like. Just a guy.
Yeah, they need. I mean, so they're already listening to offers on Anthony DeAngelo, so they're going to move him out. I don't think they need anything on the back end, but what I do think is they just need a difference maker on the wing up front.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with Teuvo Teravainen. Not that he's going to get dealt at the deadline, but he's the kind of player that Carolina just lets walk because hey, I want some money, or like it'll just be interesting to see what happens with him. I mean, he's had a pretty good year. 19 goals. He's likely to score a career high. His career high coming into this year is 23 goals. He had in 17-18. So about to hit a career high. What kind of deal does he get? Does he move on from the Hurricanes? That'll be interesting to see in the offseason, but not now. They're of course going to keep him. But yes, the Hurricanes, they desperately need goal scoring, and Tarasenko is off the board. That would have been a pretty decent fit, and I think a low cost could have seen that happening. But the best fit, honestly, would be Jake Gensel.
Yeah.
Jake Gensel would be fantastic in Carolina. I don't think that they would be willing to sign him beyond this trade deadline time. But man, if there's ever a time in the Eastern Conference to go, let's go for it. It would be right now. The Eastern Conference is pretty wide open, and I think it looks like in the first round you're going to get to play the Philadelphia Flyers, which my money would be on the Carolina Hurricanes all day, and I think the Hurricanes could beat the Rangers. So I mean, if there's a time when the Hurricanes could find themselves in the finals, it could be this year. All right, let's move to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Jack Roslovic is their only UFA. Do they make any other moves?
No, I really think he's the only piece that's probably going to get moved out, just because he has that flexibility to play on the wing and at center. And if they eat half the cap, you could probably give up a third, maybe a conditional third for a guy like Jack Roslovic, who in the past has had some offensive success. So maybe you hope that if you plug him with the right guys on the third line, right, he can chip in a few goals. But
kind of like Alexander Venberg. A very similar type of he can kind of play anywhere up in your lineup and possibly has the potential to have an offensive night.
Yep, but to me, he's probably the only piece that gets moved out of Columbus. I know Merzlikins wants out, but that's a thing that's going to happen in the offseason. So for me, just try to move out Jack Roslovic and move on.
Okay, the New Jersey Devils. They're obviously still pushing for a playoff spot. They're looking at Philadelphia going, well, you just traded away one of your top defensemen and you continue to fall. There are a lot of teams to climb. They just fired their coach. They've lost 3 in a row. They are currently 8 points out of the playoffs. Does New Jersey make any kind of push here?
Boy, if they're going to make any push, they have to. I mean, I know they're hoping for that new coach, bump that a lot of teams normally get, but I think if they're really serious about say, hey, you know what, we fired Lindy Ruff because we need a change. We think we can still make the playoffs. We think Travis Green can help us do that. Then you have to go make a play on a goaltender, right? Whether that is Jacob Markstrom now in the offseason, or you bring in somebody else in the interim, right? And just, again, that could be a Jake Allen, or again, it could be
knocked around. Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, I think you have to make a move at the goaltending position if you're serious about making a push for the playoffs for New Jersey.
Here's the other thing for New Jersey. They have one more game before deadline. It's against the St. Louis Blues. If the Devils lose to the Blues, and at the same time the Flyers manage to beat the Panthers, they would then be 10 points out of the playoffs. And you would have to think that would kind of seal the deal. It is... Yeah. And obviously they could still catch a wild card. That would be Tampa Bay, who's Detroit. Tampa Bay plays Calgary. Detroit. Does Detroit play Thursday?
They play Colorado tonight.
Yeah. So let's say all those teams win and they lose. I think at the end of Thursday, I think you might be looking at a different viewpoint. If Detroit loses, Tampa loses, Flyers lose, and the Devils win. You might be going into Friday going, okay, we feel good about ourselves. Let's pull the trigger. Otherwise, you go, oh, well, I think we can trade Thomas Nosek. Maybe you deal a Colin Miller or Brendan Smith. You just try to kind of move out some pieces, bring in a few little assets that you can then use at another trade deadline to sprinkle somewhere else. So I think the next 2 days are really crucial because they could find themselves 6 points out of the playoffs in a couple days, and that's not so bad. But if they're 10, I think they've got to call it good.
Yeah, and it's going to be key too, right, for tonight against a team like Detroit, who is going to be without Dylan Larkin for 2 weeks.
Yeah, big
So
time.
I'm interested to see how they play against Colorado. That is, without Bowen Byram, no, you know, Nichushkin. If they can take advantage of that, right, and you put New Jersey in a bigger hole, yeah, you have to. I think you have to pull the trigger at that point. You can't just sit on these pieces and say, "Cool, we're 10 points out. We might make the playoffs."
Yeah, absolutely not. Okay, the New York Islanders, it's a very similar situation to the New Jersey Devils. Definitely expected to be sitting firmly in a playoff spot at this point, and they definitely are not. They still have the same problem, even though they brought in Bo Horvat. They still have the same problem. They just can't seem to score goals on any regularity. Only 184 goals on the year. To give any perspective, the Buffalo Sabres, who are just have been awful, have only scored 183. So the Islanders not scoring any goals. Yeah, right now they sit what? Oh, they're 4 points out of a playoff spot. So they're a little closer than the Devils. Any chance they make a decent splash to try and bring in a goaltender? Are we looking at a Jake Gensel here? Do you think Pittsburgh would deal with the Islanders?
You know what? I mean, for the right price, they'd be absolutely willing to listen, because really he's going to hit free agency no matter where he goes. So you're going to lose him, and you're not losing him for nothing. So to me, I would absolutely be willing to make a deal with the Islanders, especially, I mean, let's face it, I think, Pittsburgh's done after this past weekend, those couple losses. But, a couple other names, it wouldn't shock me if they make a push for, Riley Smith as well. Again, they need goal scoring help. So they're similar to Carolina. I think they could use a top six winger for sure.
By the way, a couple things have come in here. I guess the Penguins have now asked all offers for Gensel to come in by 7 p.m. tonight. So that's in about 23 minutes. So we're recording this 23 minutes too soon. But it sounds like Vancouver, Vegas, Florida, Edmonton, New York, and Colorado all in there. But I got to imagine there's even more. And then also Elliot Friedman just tweeted that Vegas is in on Hanifin. Of course they are. That will only happen if they don't get Jake Gensel. So, yeah, when you said that the Vegas Golden Knights weren't done, and they're going to fully use all of Mark Stone's $9.5 million and keep him on LTIR for all of eternity until the playoffs start. Yeah, that'll happen again. I know
apparently Alec Martinez went on injured reserve this morning, so now they have an opening next to Alex Pietrangelo.
Perfect. Noah Hanifin, here we come. Let's stack it up. I know we talked a little bit about the New York Rangers after they acquired Venberg. Do you think they make any other moves?
A guy like Pavel Buchnevich, to me, would be a perfect fit here. Obviously, he's been there before. He might be the only guy that I think I could see, New York going after. They still have, 2.9 in cap space remaining. But, again, they've got all their first-round picks, no second-round picks over the next 3 years, no thirds over the next 2 years. So, again, it wouldn't also shock me if they just stay put and, again, take Wenberg and go in with what they've got. Because they're looking very good, very comfortable right now.
I got to imagine they're in on Gensel. That if they could get Gensel, that would be a huge boost.
Wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, wouldn't shock me either. The Philadelphia Flyers already have dealt Sean Walker. Nick Seeler is apparently hurt now, so I'm wondering. Oh no, and he signed to a 4-year extension. So, but he is hurt. So yeah, that I guess we were gonna make a bet, right? Sean Walker and Nick Seeler, if both of them were dealt.
I said one of them would get dealt, and you said none of them. So
that's true. Do you say? Oh, you only said one. I thought you said both.
No, I said one of them. One of them could definitely. I could see both of them.
Like my Mao poker. Both of them had to get dealt. You win. None of them for me to win. One, it's just a wash. That's the way I'm going with it, at least.
All right, fair.
So they do bring Ryan Johansson in. He was waived. There's a chance maybe they bring him back up, and maybe it's possible. To me, they're going, well, let's waive him. Let's see if somebody will just take him, and if they don't, then we can always bring him back up and see how he fits into our team. And that's always possible.
Yeah, you never know, right? Maybe just a new change of scenery, right? It gets a little spark because, again, Philly is still trying to get in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So if Ryan Johansson can be a little bit of his former self, it's only going to help boost that forward group. And they're going to need it because they're a little depleted on defense, especially like you said with Nick Seeler. They're the NHL's best shot blocker and one of their better defensive players is going to be out for a little bit. So they're going to need that help up front.
Yeah. What if the Philadelphia Flyers go and trade for Matt Dumba?
I mean, it would be relatively cheap, right? They've got a lot of capital to do it, but
yeah, there you go. Okay, well let's swing over to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Kind of the Flyers are sort of done. The Penguins, to me, I don't see Jeff Carter getting moved here at the deadline. Obviously, it's Jake Gensel, and let's talk about that. What do you think they're looking for in return? That's one thing that really hasn't been talked about. It's the return's going to be big, but what would they be looking for? Because this isn't a team that's just going to give up. Like they're not. Yes, they're out of the playoffs this year, but they have Crosby, Malkin, Letang. This team's just not going to call it good and start rebuilding.
Yeah, no, I do think
And
Kyle
Carl
Dubas isn't looking to rebuild, but he's also looking to get younger too, right? So again, with a guy like Jake Gensel, I think you're starting with a first round pick, but I also think you have to have a top level prospect in there. Now, again, what kind of prospect, whether it's on the back end, up front, I don't know, but I do think they're looking for somebody who's not necessarily NHL ready, but is like going to be ready next year.
Okay. Yep. I think that's fair. I'm guessing there will be a pick involved. A first round pick will be in there, unless it's a bomb prospect that was a first round pick last year or something like that. I could see that taking the place, and likely looking for some kind of roster player as well that can immediately step in, which is the tough part because you don't want to give up a roster player if you're a good team. That's going to be Pittsburgh's challenge. The Washington Capitals, there are a couple players left here that I wonder about, especially Max Pacioretty. He does have a no move clause, but Max Pacioretty, I know he's had his injury struggles, but he's been really good since he's come back. 15 points in 25 games. He's not like scoring a ton of goals. He only has 3 goals, but he's at least contributing offensively. And if Washington eats half that deal, that's $1 million. And who doesn't want the potential of Max Pacioretty to just kind of open it up in the playoffs? You just never know. I got to think that somebody out there is looking at him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of teams are going to look at him, but I think really you're going to see the teams that are looking at Jake Gensel and maybe Riley Smith go after a guy like Pacioretty if they lose out on one of those guys.
2:30 p.m. tomorrow. Yeah. The other name, of course, Joel Edmondson, could be a nice get. If you need that bottom pairing defenseman, still a decent, nice tall defenseman who can play some playoff hockey.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's worth a low end pick. I mean, on a guy who's been to the finals a couple times. So to me, you could absolutely make a play on a guy like this and not gamble too much with like a 5th or 6th round pick.
Beautiful. The Boston Bruins, we have touched on them quite a bit, so we won't spend a lot of time here. But aside from a center, do you see them doing anything? We see them going out and grabbing another defenseman or any other moves that you think that they'll make, or are they pretty much like we got to get a center or we're done, or the defenseman that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, with no Hannafin, I could see them being a wild card and a guy like that. But honestly, I think they would ultimately end up losing out anyways because they know they can't re-sign him long term. So to me,
their offer won't be as strong.
Right, won't be as strong. So to me, a guy like Elias Lindholm is probably the play. You're moving maybe a guy like Jake DeBrusk out because they do have to move some salary out. So I'm letting him go for Elias Lindholm all day.
Okay. Let's go to the Buffalo Sabres. There's one name I gotta think he maybe 2. Victor Olofsson. I mean, he's the one guy here who I think maybe doesn't fit anymore. He can hop onto a team's power play. He's got a nice shot from the circle. I mean, he only has 4 goals this year, though. I mean, but coming off a 28 and a 20 goal season the 2 years prior, I think this is more of an issue with the team that he's on and less the player. So I wonder if he were to go to a team that actually had some life to it, if he wouldn't play better. I mean, how many guys have gone to Buffalo and played there for a while and just like seen their entire perspective just wash away? Remember, didn't Ryan O'Reilly say that he didn't like hockey anymore because of the
Right.
and Ryan O'Reilly's like the freaking most hockey guy ever. So I think if I'm a team who misses out on Gensel, he's who I'm targeting.
Wow. Okay.
He's almost a 30 goal scorer last year. I think that he's in a position, especially if your power play is not performing. He's a great guy to stick on that power play. I think he can change that with his shot. And I think the price would be relatively cheap other than the dollar amount. So if you're a team with a little bit of space, even if you have to deal them and some other team eats the other half, I mean, you can get that down pretty low. It would be him and then Eric Johnson, who has obviously won a cup a couple years ago. I think that he would be a good addition to any team that wants some depth on defense.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind Eric Johnson just because he's a righty, right? Those are definitely hard to find, and he's got that playoff pedigree. But to me, I think both of these guys, like you mentioned, Johnson and Olofsson, they're going to be last minute, like, oh crap, we can't get our guy, like 245, let's make the call. We'll deal a 5th or 6th round pick and try to bring him in.
Okay. The Detroit Red Wings, couple UFAs. I don't think they're dealing any of them. And they are certainly at least going to be Stan Patters here at the deadline. Do you think they make any moves?
So, yeah, UFAs, they're not moving anybody out. They're keeping everybody for a nice run. Patty Kane, David Perron, they're keeping him. They're even talking about an extension. But to me, if they're making any moves, it's long-term, right? So they're guys that have term or guys that they can get signed. And that's why I mentioned Noah Hannafin. I think he could be a potential target for the Red Wings because they need somebody in that top 4 on the left side to maybe bump a guy like, Jeff Petrie or Oli Mata out of the lineup a little bit and give them a little bit more flexibility as far as, the defense is concerned. But to me, yeah, Noah Hannafin, if they can get a sign and trade done, I think that's probably the one big target they could go after. But other than that, I think they're probably just going into the playoffs, riding high.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're probably if Tampa Bay is the favorite, I could see Detroit as like the next tier of teams that he'd be willing to go to. So that's certainly a possibility. Okay, let's go to the Florida Panthers, possibly one of the favorite teams in the Eastern Conference right now to go to the finals again. They've been rolling. Obviously, they're not trading away any of their UFAs. They acquired Vladimir Tarasenko from the Ottawa Senators. And do you think that that's it? I mean, I know their names have been around. There are names around Jake Gensel. I've even heard them around Hannafin. Do you think ultimately the Panthers make any big splashes here? They have $2.9 million available in cap space. So they could make one more move, but do they disrupt what is working so well?
Yeah, so you mentioned, right, disrupting what's been working well. And to me, I'm not a fan of the Tarasenko move just because they're going to start disrupting what has worked so well, right? You bring in a guy who, yes, has to play in your top 6. You don't put a guy like Tarasenko down on your third line. And the Lamborghini has looked very, very well in that third line right wing spot. And now you bump Evan Rodriguez down there potentially just so you can put Tarasenko in your top 6. Don't like that, but we'll see how it plays out. I might be wrong, which would be great. But for me, if I'm Florida, the only other move I might pull the trigger on would be potentially bringing in maybe like a 6 or 7 defenseman, just a depth guy to to deal with potential injuries or something like that.
Okay. The Montreal Canadiens, really, I mean, for a team that has been rebuilding, been pretty quiet all year long. If there's one team where it's like, where's the Montreal Canadiens been? It would be them. They have been basically as expected, as advertised, just not very good, but not god awful. They've got one UFA in Tanner Pearson in the forward group. They really have none on defense at all. On injured reserve, they've got like Colin White, Chris Weidman, but I don't think they're getting moved because they're hurt. Any chance Tanner Pearson moves again?
No, I don't think anybody really wants him.
Yeah, I would agree. And the only other player that could move is David Savard. He's got another year left on his deal here, so I think that makes it a little more tough to get this deal done. And I think that you'd have to give up at least a first round pick to get David Savard at this stage. Again, that could be whoever loses out on Hannafin goes, well, let's go get David Savard because he has been to the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. He could be a potential move. Jake Allen's another name I've heard out there, but To me, it's tough because the goalie market, in my opinion, is sort of cooled. I think outside of Colorado needing a backup and New Jersey looking for him, there's not a lot of teams out there that are looking for goaltenders. And so Jake Allen with another year left, I think he's probably more or less dealt in the offseason than the deadline.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just so hard to deal goalies. Okay, the Ottawa Senators, and they, speaking of a team that needs to figure out their goalie situation, it's the Ottawa Senators, but that's not going to happen right now. They have already dealt Tarasenko. They have Kubalik, who's a UFA. It's funny enough, but Kubalik would be a good fit going back to Detroit again. I thought he was a good fit in Detroit, and I think that he could be again. He wouldn't be a bad little scoop up here at the deadline to kind of add some depth to your bottom six.
Yeah, Kubalik's not bad if you're not worried about him playing defense, because he's not going to do that. So I think Detroit does have more concerns about that now than they did, and that's probably why they didn't bring him back. But yeah, if you're a team though that wants to bring in a guy who, you know, you've got responsible players on your third and fourth line that can protect him, then absolutely he still has a bomb. He's a right-handed shot, so he could be a potential second power play guy for you.
All right, yeah, and I guess there's always the possibility that Chychrun gets dealt. He's got another year left, 4.6. It's going to be tough to fit. Like, there's no way Ottawa's holding on to any of that salary, so that's going to be the tough part. But Chychrun could be a guy that move. It would be the one move that I could see like the St. Louis Blues doing. Like, let's go out and trade for Chychrun and we'll sign him. They seem to do that with some defensemen. So I could see that, because that would be a move to, like, let's see if we can make the playoffs, but also we'll have him next year and he'll make our defense better, because St. Louis is desperate to blow that defense up. But they haven't been able to. So that's the one move I could see St. Louis making for Chychrun.
Okay.
Let's go to the Tampa Bay Lightning. The obvious elephant in the room is Stamkos being a UFA right now, but I don't think that's getting solved anytime soon. That's just going to have to be something that's weird and gets talked about until the day he signs another deal or doesn't. But do you think outside of Noah Hannafin, the Tampa Bay Lightning going to do anything this year? Or do they just say, this really isn't our year? I mean, if I'm Tampa Bay, I'm just going, why don't we just not deal anything and just sign Hannafin in the offseason? Like, Hannafin's already told you, this is where I want to play. You just got to go, well, let's just wait. He'll sign here.
That absolutely could still happen in the offseason, but I do think they want to make a push. They wouldn't mind bringing another guy to replace the minutes lost by Sergachev, right? They could desperately need that top four defenseman back there to help out, but to do that, they've got to move salary out, right? And you want to make one last push for Stamkos. I think you don't want to stand pat. Whether or not they bring in Hannafin or not, I think they're going to move. They're going to try to make a move for somebody on the back end, and they've got $5.9 million cap space at the deadline, so they've got the room to do it. But it's when you bring in a guy like Hannafin, for example, right? You're expecting to sign him long term. He wants to sign there. And it's, what are you giving up, right? It's because they've only got $10 million next season. So does that mean Stamkos doesn't resign, or do you move where what I've heard is a piece like Anthony Cirelli that, Calgary has definitely been interested in and wouldn't mind bringing in to be like a number 2 center behind Nazem Kadri.
You trade Cirelli for Hannafin? That would be, yeah, I don't know.
I wouldn't do that if I'm Tampa, but
no, you have to have something coming back the other way, which Calgary does have more assets. So that could be a good way to not have to fully rebuild. You bring in a good other center who knows how to win and likes playing Blake Coleman. You're right. Okay, let's finish it off with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I actually didn't do this on purpose at all. It's just all alphabetical order. Toronto Maple Leafs. From my perspective, they went out, they got Lyubushkin. It's fine. I mean, he got hurt like in his first game. I don't know that they really do a whole lot here. Like, aside from the real deep depth pieces, I don't think they're in on Gensel. I don't think they're in on Hannafin. I don't see any of that happening. I think what is going to happen next offseason is going to be, it's going to be the big one, because you've got Tavares with one more year, Marner with one more year. They can both be re-upped on July 1st. You're going to have Bertuzzi and Domi off the books. You're going to have, there's a lot of Brody off the books. You're going to have really no goaltender outside of Joseph Wall signed. That's when the changes are coming. And I think they're looking at this team going, let's just see where we go. Let's give them a few depth pieces in case we get injuries, and let's let's just kind of let it play itself out, because it's just not like the defense is just not good enough, and it's they just kind of haven't found the right pieces. Although Bertuzzi has been really good as of late, he looks much better. I just don't know that they're going to go. What do they have to give away? They don't have first round picks. They have this first round pick, but if you give up this first round pick, you literally have no draft picks. You have no draft picks next year until the 5th round. You have 1 third round pick in the 2024 draft after your first. So I think you got to maybe say, maybe this just isn't going to be the year we go all in, but we'll give them some support so that there's a few more depth pieces. I think that's where they go.
Yeah, it's a tough ask to try to bring in a top 4 defenseman, which I think this team desperately needs at this point. But
with 144,000 in cap space.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? They're limited on space, and you've got to send money out the other way, right? But but here's the thing, though, because I've been hearing rumors about this, and I don't know what you've read, but I've heard Nick Robertson is not happy. And if, like you mentioned, those missing draft picks they have, if you're interested in, potentially recouping some of those, I'm not saying do it now. I would definitely hang on to him for a playoff run, even if you do have to play Boston first round. But in the offseason, maybe do entertain, maybe moving out a guy like Nick Robertson to help, again, kind of reshape that back end or bring in draft picks.
Yeah. The one thing that I saw that was interesting, what if you traded TJ Brody and Nick Robertson for Colton Parayko and like a first? I think that's something that St. Louis would entertain. And then St. Louis flips Brody as a UFA, right? They flip him somewhere else to a playoff.
He's got a 10-team no trade clause, but I doubt St. Louis would be on there.
Yeah.
So, boy, that's
that'd
be interesting.
Fun idea. Just a fun idea.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we got through all 32 teams. We'll wrap it up here, and of course, tons of moves are probably going to be made in the next 6 minutes after we sign off. Anyways, I haven't seen any new ones come in. I've been refreshing.
I've been refreshing.
I think we're safe, but we'll continue, and you can find us on Instagram and
here we go. So
something just happened.
So on tonight's edition of TNT's Daily Faceoff, Friedman broke live on the air that Hanifin will be headed to Vegas.
There it is. Wow.
So again, it's not set in stone yet, but it looks like he's going to Vegas, baby.
There it is. The Vegas Golden Knights get Noah Hanifin, and I'll go back and delete half of our show. Freaking A.
I can't wait to see what the return on that is, because he's definitely not signing there long term. So this is a pure rental for sure.
All right. I love it. Yes, the plan is to on Instagram to as trades get broken. I'm maybe yourself. I am going to break some things on there and on our reels on there. So you can find those at OT Hockey Talk. And until the next time, and we'll break down all the deals that were made and the remaining ones on trade deadline day. Justin, enjoy the craziest time of year as
love it.
A hockey analyst. All right. We'll talk to you guys soon.